Okay. So yeah. So let's just look at good old fashioned CSS. It's been around forever. It's been the way we've been styling web pages. So let's go ahead, start up our app. Start. And actually, maybe I'll just throw these side by side so I don't have to like keep switching back and forth. Okay, so I can go to like my app.js, make a change. So I can come in here and give this a class. I mean, I have to call it class name because we're in JSX, and I can do like container or whatever. And then I can, since I'm importing the app.css, I can just do that here. Go to the app.css, go ahead, delete all that. Do my .container. Did I spell container wrong? I just want to make sure it's spelled that. Okay. And then do like a order pixel solid red. Oh. There we go. There's my styling. And so I could go, let's say like we had Figma boot strap. Like we have this kit or something. Maybe if I wanted to like have this one like heading. Oh, it's too bad they don't like show the CSS stuff. But I could say like, oh, their heading is, it looks like it's 40 pixels. It's probably bold. I don't know if I can tell what type of font it is. Aren't they showing me that? Oh wait, here we go. Sweet. I needed to go to the inspect. So I could like a lot of this I could copy. So I could do like, let's just call this main, or let's just style this as like, this is like my H1. So I could now go in and, throw this as my H1 styles. I probably don't want this to be there. And I'm not sure if I'm going to have like this inter font family.
Now, when you only have H1, is it going to do every single H1 that you have on the page?
Yeah. So I'm doing H1. So I'm saying, hey, style all the H1s. So that should style that. And, just to maybe, just to show, color green. So now all my H1s are going to have that style. And, I could come in, I could do a new file. Like, let's just do some, I don't know, I'm just component1.js. Just say like H1 in component1. Yeah, it's just sure we can leave that, have the container too. So I just essentially copied my app and just wrote comp1. I removed the app.css import. Is this going to be styled? Am I going to have the container here? Because I'm not importing the CSS.
No, you should have to go to the top and import the CSS still, right?
Yeah, let's look at that. Let's just say h1 in app. So we can see that, and then we'll do our
You shouldn't have to import it, right? Because if you're linking that comp one, it should apply to it, right?
so here's the thing, I am importing it. I'm importing it right here.
No, I mean on your comp one
Yeah,
component.
yeah, and I am importing it. Like this import from app CSS, it's going to be like that import where it's really getting imported. It's like in my index.html. Like all of my styles, even though they might be different CSS files, they're all just going to be plopped, in your HTML page. So there's no such thing in React as like, I could come in here and do like a comp 1.css and have this be a h1, because maybe in here for whatever reason, I want this to be color. And then you think I could come in here and, import comp 1.css. Import, I always read it, import from. I can just do that. Okay. Import. Now it's purple. Oh wait, now my other H1's purple. So you see what's happening there is like I'm importing it, it's working, it's making that one purple, but oh, now it's overwriting that one. And this is kind of showing like one of, a potential issue with CSS. And that, CSS class, like these are named, like these are global. So if I do like an H1 and, say this is purple, and then somewhere else in another CSS file, I have H1 and say it's color green. Like, I now have two colorings on my H1s and only one's going to be applied. And that's not great, right? I want to do, wait, somebody, Patty. I want to do this in here.
CSS loads top down, right?
What?
Doesn't CSS load top down? So if you were to, like,
Yeah,
if you were
like,
to put the H1 on the container, then it would be green, right?
like, yeah, I mean, so CSS has rules of like what gets overwritten. So it's just whatever stuff. Well, first it's going to be whatever. Well, since I don't have any nesting of my stylings, it's just going to be whichever file was loaded last. And that's technically comp one. So really what happens is this is probably just being compiled. And then like, you can really just think of this. Once it's done, that style gets thrown there.
Gotcha.
But there are rules like, I can come in and I could do like, so this style right here, like it's within a container H1. So I could do something like this, say, hey, like anything that is in a container, and if that's also in a container, And then there's an H1. Make that purple. Oh, I still have this in here. So see if that fixes it. Oh no, let's see, this is, how would I make this work? It's in it. There it is. So now I can do like, so CSS can also like be applied to like specific rules. So this one's a little more specific. It's saying, hey, if there's a container div and it can, so let's go backwards. If there's an H1 directly in a container, that's directly in a container, make it purple. This H1 right here is only in a container.
Yeah, I see that.
So there's these, you know, CSS rules of which things get implied, and then I can do things like important. It says, hey, you know, make, well, actually, yeah, let's do this. I need to come down here and just do H1. Let's make this like orange. I make that important. But now I have to like importance, you know, importance going to override everything. But then if I have like a rule that like, oh, this is more specific than that important. So all of these things that I'm showing you, this makes kind of CSS like a nightmare in my mind. Because it can be really hard. Like you can have like these, you know, it starts out well where you're like, okay, I'm going to like just have a style for H1 just everywhere. But then maybe there's like another H1 where, you know, you want it to be a little different. Why? I don't know. But then you can get into this conflicts where like, you know, there's this, people are overriding stuff. There's these rules of like which one has more, it's more specific. Then you really want to just style something and you can't figure out which one is causing the style. So then you write the important keyword and then that just screws everything up. So yeah, CSS can get messy.
Can you just call it, you know, sort of H1, H2, H3, H4? You do it that way to get around that?
Yeah, I mean, I can go in and
I mean, obviously you have to keep track of all that stuff, but you
yeah,
can just,
no, totally. You can totally do that. That works. Have different, and I would want to do that. I would want to have different styles for H1, H2, H3, but it gets messy. I think CSS definitely, as your project gets bigger too, it gets harder to maintain, but it's definitely like the tried and true way. It's like, you know, CSS does have some nice things about it just because it's been around for so long. You know, great Google resources, stuff like that. The other way, you know, that we've seen is I can go into like my comp1 component and I can just do a style right here. I can do what's called inline styling. Let's do color is blue. Now inline styling just kind of like overwrites that styling. I think important overwrites inline. Yeah. So if you have important, that's going to override inline styling. But inline styling is going to overwrite this purple style. Like, so it's more specific. Cool. So before React, inline styling was considered to be very bad. Why? Any ideas maybe why it's bad?
You said why inline styling is bad?
Yeah,
It's really hard to read.
it's hard to read. It's messy.
It's kind of unorganized, kind
Yeah.
of relating to the same thing.
It's a lot more work.
Yeah, it's unorganized. It's more work because this
Probably
style
harder.
right here is only going to be applied to this H1. So it's very easy if you start doing inline styling. You know, I come in here and I make this color like still blue. Or like, let's say the color, like, because blue in RGB is what? It's red. It's 00000 FF. There's blue. So maybe, you know, I'm trying to maintain that blue color. And in here, I do inline styling and I say, oh, you know, it's 00DD. And like, these now are not like, I don't know if you can tell, these are not the same blues. So I want these to be blue, but now they're not the same. And then if I want to go change this from blue to like black, inline styling's bad, well, because now I need to change it here. I change it here to black. But then that one's not changed. It's like, oh man, where is that? I have to go find that inline styling and change that to black. And there we go. That's fixed. But that's why inline styling, you know, before React, if you're just doing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, that would not be good. Actually, not got in trouble, but I remember I did some inline styling. Like I was doing it just because it is nice because you can, with like this, with like things being specific in CSS and you're trying just to get a style to show up and you're like, you can't because there's like a really nested like CSS rule somewhere. Inline styling is nice because it overrides everything. It overrides all of these like very specific things. So you can just style it and it works. But it's going to make your, as far as your code, it's going to make it very unmaintainable. And then it's also going to start to drift. Like your styles will inevitably start drifting. And I would say probably one of the most important things with having a good looking app is being consistent, is consistency. So it's like having the same margins, having the same borders, having the same colors. If those start to be a little off, those little differences add up to just be like, oh, the app is going to look bad. So inline styling is bad, except when we get to React. It's maybe not so bad anymore. Because what I could do is I could create like a component header.js. So I come in here, I create a component called header. And, you know, I come in here, just do it as a div, doesn't even need to be like an H3 or H1 or anything. Do something like this, like let's give this props. Props.text. So now I can come in here and I can give this. And usually how we do inline styling with JavaScript is, because this was, someone said this, it's messy. I can make this not messy and, you know, do it down here. Write it in an object down here. Color blue. And like I could take, so let's just take all of this like all of
If you
this.
do CSS on its own page, you can share it across multiple components, right?
What?
if you do CSS on its own page, then you can share it across multiple components, right? And not have to do things over again from page to page.
Yeah, but that's kind of bad. Because you're going to have all these CSS files and they're all going to be globally applied to all files.
Yeah.
So you have to be really organized, and CSS can get hard to read. So what I can do, let's just go back to this header. Well, let's go to I'm going to take all those styles. Take these. I'm going to get rid of this green because we don't need the green. So let's go back to my header component. Take those. I mean, this is no longer CSS. So this, I have to like convert this to like JavaScript, to camel case, and like, make this an object. So this like can all kind of become, I don't want to say it's a problem, but it's not as easy to like copy and paste stuff. So I have to like convert this to like a JavaScript object, and then do styles or style equal styles dot header container. Or let's do this. Let's just say we have like an H1. I'm not going to do them all, but let's just do a couple. H2, and like an H2 is going to be smaller. And we'll just make it kind of obvious that it's not the same. So I could have a function like get header in here. Because what I could do is something like this. I could say like in this function, I could say like if, props dot, we're going to do like this as prop. I'm going to say if this is, as H1, return styles.h1. Else return styles.h2. Let's actually have it go this way. So by default, it's going to be an H1 header, but if they give us like an as H2, that will be as an H2. And then I can have a header, where we get the header, and right, I mean, and also, yeah, let's just leave it like this for now. So what I have this header that now has this inline styling, but I can now go in and like give this a prop. So now my header component, I can use it as either a H1 or an H2. So let's export default. Okay. And let's go to my app.js. I'm just an H3 be like inline. So let's grab that header component. I have a text prop, I believe. Like header one text. And this can be self-closing. And that break. Let's see what's breaking here. Go to my console because I have an error. Console. Nothing was returned. That's a good point. Did not return that. the above occurred. The style prop expects a mapping from styles. Ooh. Oh, I never called this function. So here's my inline component. It has those styles. I can now do this, and I can do like an as h2. And there we go. So I can define a header component. And then I can come in here and like give it just a prop, and that's going to change the style. And then if I ever want to use a header component, or if I ever want like an H1 and H2, H3, H4, I use this header component. And even though these are inline style, all these styles live here in this component. So all of a sudden that's fine now because I'm reusing this component. So then down the road, if someone says, hey, you know what, I want my H1s to be 50. I mean, this is huge. It's like because styles are going to change. And like, you know, all of a sudden your designer's like, you know, our H1 should be 50 pixels. I come into one place, boom. That's going to change all my heading ones to 50 pixels because I'm always going to be reusing this header component. Like never in my app should I see H1. If I'm ever doing a header, I'm using the header component. Does that make sense? This is really important. But you know, we're making this reusable, and this is a thing about React, like this is just really, it's a way to make these styles reusable. Now I could come in here and like have this, instead of being inline styling, I could do CSS and maybe style it that way. So I could kind of use the same concept, and instead of doing inline styles, I could still create this header component and, you know, have a function like where I'm doing that with the class name. But I still think in a way, inline styling, in my mind, it has a benefit. Because CSS is not really a coding language. It's just CSS. It's just like text. But what kind of file are we in here right now?
In JavaScript?
We're in JavaScript. So what's more functional, JavaScript or CSS?
JavaScript.
Yeah, by a lot. I mean, there's like things called Sass where you can do like variables in CSS and you can kind of write functions and yada, 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 but it's not JavaScript. So this is nice. I can, you know, write JavaScript in here. So let's say like we have a color and, you know, it's a primary color. Let's say the primary color is, I don't know, let's just go to my coding stuff. Let's go pick one out. UI goodies, color, happy hues. What's a good primary color? Okay, let's actually do one that's a white background because that's what we have. Cool. Headline, let's take that color. Why is this not showing up? This might be. Not like red, or is that the color? I guess that is like a pretty black looking color. Or is it? Let me just change this to make it more dramatic. Yeah, okay. I guess I just picked like a color that I thought was blue, but it's really like, it's kind of hard to tell. Okay, let's say that lovely green is the color we want. But this is just JavaScript, right? Because something I might want to do, this is really like my primary color. I want to call that primary color and I want to reuse that. Because maybe I'm going to have like a button that also uses, like I want, let's say, if I go to my app.js, let's just do here, I want my border. So I'm going to do a style right here. I'm just going to override that style border 1 pixel solid. Then I'm going to take this color, paste it here. Let's make that a little bigger, 5 pixels. So now my text and my border are the same color. Can anyone see the issue with kind of what I'm doing here? Like I have the color here and then I have it here. And think about maybe all the other places I could be potentially using it because it's like my primary color of my application. What's kind of bad about this? Like, why is this bad to like hard code this?
You'd have to change it too many places if you wanted to change it.
Yeah, like right now it's green. Like that's a horrible color. Like maybe down the road I want to change it. Also, if I'm coding this and I want to use this color, like I'm not going to remember that 025826. And then it's also just like what is that? That's not really readable. So there's a couple things wrong. So what we can do is like in our sort, and this will be like a simplified way to do this is I can come in here, maybe create like a styles.js folder or file. And then I can grab that color. And inside of here, just do this. Let's do const primary color. So I'm going to make this as const because I don't expect it to change. I'm going to do this. We're going to do this all uppercase. It's just kind of a convention because like this is like a hard coded value that I never expect to change in my app. And I always know what it's going to be. Like this is always like, I know it has a value of 025826. And then I export this color. And you know, I could have like a secondary color. You know, that can be like that. So now I can, you know, define styles once. And I'll reuse in my app. So then in my component or where in my header, instead of using this hard-coded one, I'm going to just grab my primary color. I need to import that. And then for my app.js, do that here. So now that I'm reusing this primary color variable, if someone says, hey, you need to change that primary color because we don't like it, it's like, okay, let's change that to that. Refresh. I swear that didn't change it. Zero to 0. And there we go. And now that's changed. So it changes both the border and the header. So inline styling can be nice. Like it's not really that bad. And you might see it, but there's going to be another issue, and there is a way around this with inline styling, but let's say we just decide to do inline styling. How do I do something like a hover? Like I want to hover over this and have it have an effect, or like an animation. How do we do a hover in CSS? Does anyone know?
Is it on hover?
It's like this. It's a pseudo selector. I actually might need to Google the right one or the right syntax, but red. H1. Okay, now I forgot. How did I forget to do it? Hover CSS. I had it right. Oh, this is not a string. Okay, I had that as a string, so I should be able to, where's my, oh, there we go. I hover over an H1 and there we go. It's red. Wonder when this one might not be doing it because we have that inline styling. That's, how we can do a hover is we do a pseudo selector. But with inline styling, we can't really do that. So we're going to need to use, if we're doing inline styling, we need to use a third-party library. So we're kind of seeing like, CSS has some advantages, has some disadvantages. Inline styling has some advantages, has some disadvantages. So what we're going to use instead is a library called styled components. That is an attempt to try to give us kind of the benefits of both. So we can like write CSS, but we can also write that in JavaScript. We can do this reusability. We're not going to have like these global namespace problems that we do with CSS. So we can kind of take the styling portion of our app and some of those problems and make them more React-like and more component-like. Because you see like just with this header component, do you see how this kind of is really starting to organize our code? Like this header component itself might get a little complicated as we define it, but when we use it, it's going to be really easy to use. We just give it some text and then, is this an H2 or an H1? And we could do that with all of our headers. Yay, Nate, is that? Or are you still just thinking CSS is better?
Oh, I see how that's better. It's just wonderful to remember all the stuff.
It's not this, yeah, because this is not real. This is just like kind of going in, just briefly showing here's some of the pros and cons to CSS. Here's some of the pros and cons to inline styling. But yeah, kind of to give us a little setup for the benefits of style components.
I mean,
Because I
is
don't.
it,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry. Is it kind of industry standard though, when they're designing out the UI to call things like header and like designate different things? So it'd be easier to break it out in React versus CSS.
To like to call like the components or the HTML or sorry, would you kind of ask that again?
Yeah, sorry. So like when they're designing the UI, they're probably going to name things like, here's what we want all of our headers to be. And here's what we want like our paragraphs or like content, I guess. So in that sense, is it more industry standard to kind of take those names and then apply them like you're doing here, like creating their own components and organizing it that way?
Yeah, and see that's where it's like a little different between like company and like what is the, because there can always be this gap between like the designer and the coder. So this is where something like Figma comes in useful. So because a designer might not know like H1, H2, H3, H4. They might just give you something like this. Here are the 4 sizes of headings we're going to use. And because they don't like, why is there 6 headings? Maybe they don't care. They don't want 6 headings. They just want 4 headings. So the designer would be like, okay, here's the text we're going to use. Like, here are the variations. Here's like our main text. Here's a like, might be a little bigger text because this is like, you can see these are a little different. But then your designer might say, okay, this is the only thing, these are the only kinds of text I'm going to use. And then you as a coder might have to like figure out how to organize that. But yeah, maybe it would be nice if, you know, the designer says like, okay, here are all the cards I'm going to use. And it would be nice if we could agree on some names between the designer and coder, but like the coder might not know, hey, this is like a div and this is an H2 and this is a paragraph tag. To the designer, it's like this right here is going to be one of these texts. And I don't know like if they have a name for it or not. Like that's probably their name for it, is like display heading 1. Like this is body text. I don't know if I like. Could see. They actually, so this one is broken up into components. Like you can actually do components in Figma. Like this is a card body. But does that, it really depends on your company. Like this example right here, this React Bootstrap, this is like very well organized. Where there's going to be a very, you know, these Figma components are probably going to translate to actual React components, which is nice. But that is not always going to be the case. Does that help or make sense?
Yeah, it does.
I really
Like
think
it just seems simpler to take, if they're not using like all the H1 and everything, to just take what they're using and organize it into React components.
yeah. So yeah, and you know they might not, so they might know nothing about React, and they'd be like, okay, here's like our badges we're going to design, and then you'd be like, ooh, I could like make that into a component. and like, oh, I could have these all be one component, and like I could have like a rounded prop. So if someone gives me on the badge a rounded prop, like I round the border. Now, in the designer's mind, they might not know anything about that. They just, want some default badges and they want some pill badges. But you as like a coder, it's kind of like, oh yes, I could make all of these in one component. And even this counter badge, I could throw all of these concepts of like how these could be used in one React component. You want to try to do that as a demo?
Yeah,
And we
Yeah.
can do it with styled components.
Because
Let's
with
maybe
CSS,
just-
you'd basically have to have like one for each of them, right?
I mean, there's a way, like CSS, there's still like, you could do like this, yeah, you could do like a class name of badge and then add a class name of like bordered or rounded. And then like class name of like a color. I mean, we are going to have to like give it some information about, does it need to be bordered and the color.
are you limited to just those kind of, I don't know if someone will actually want to do this, but can you decide what shape it is, or are you just limited to just the square or pill?
I mean, if this was an app and they were having us, I would be, limited to like this has a, like I can tell this has a border radius. Like I would want that border radius to be 2 pixels. Like if,
No, I mean, if you were doing it, could you go nuts and just make it any shape that you want, or is it just limited to squares and rounded edge?
I mean, I could make a star button. Is that? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering. Yeah, I
But
was just
what
wondering if it
I'm
was just
saying
the same.
is the designer's giving this to you, so you need to match this exactly as the designer gives it to you. So yeah, if they gave you a star button, you would have to match that. And then you might be like, how long it's going to take me to make a star button? Will you just do a square, please? Or something like that. Cool. I'd say this, let's take a break. This is a good time for a break. Because when we get back, we'll just hop right into styled components. And maybe we won't do this whole thing, like all the colors, but let's maybe kind of just do a little demo with this. Like, yeah, we have these 2 things, and I want to make a component with this. So let's take a break. Let's come back at 11:45, and we'll start building this out.